Whether you serve meals to 10 students or to 1,000 each day, you have a puzzle to solve. Will our meal meet USDA nutritional guidelines? How many servings can we get from a specific quantity of food? How much raw product is needed for the ready-to-cook food in a standardized recipe? How much food do we need to buy? The answers to these questions and many more can be found in the Food Buying Guide for Child Nutrition Programs. The Food Buying Guide is an online management tool for how much food to include in the recipes, which ultimately determines how much food to buy and prepare. It can also be printed out and kept in your kitchen as a handy resource at your fingertips. The Food Buying Guide also helps you identify food contributions in the meal patterns, yield data for hundreds of food items, and it is a valuable element when you write standardized recipes for your meals. Let's look at how the Food Buying Guide is broken down. In the introduction, you will find a tremendous amount of information for planning your school meals. There are charts for the various meal patterns, a list of common recipe and food service abbreviations, common can and jar sizes used in child nutrition programs, decimal equivalents, and fractional units used in standardized recipes, an explanation of the different scoops and ladle sizes and their capacities for serving the right portions for the various grade levels, and a full explanation of how the Food Buying Guide works. The next 5 sections include yield data for meat or meat alternates, vegetables, fruits, grains or breads, milk, and other foods used in our school meals. In the appendices, you'll find additional tools. Appendix A is recipe analysis. This tool helps calculate the contributions of various recipe ingredients toward the meat or meat alternate, vegetables, fruits, and grain components of the meal pattern requirements. In Appendix B, using column 6 for recipe analysis shows how to use yield data to calculate the food contributions of recipe ingredients for the components in the meal patterns. In a moment, we will go more in depth into the column layout. Appendix C includes a brief description of the USDA Child Nutrition Labeling Program, types of foods that may be child nutrition labeled, what the child nutrition logo looks like, and additional yield data. Appendix D summarizes the purchasing process for fruits and vegetables. And Appendix E has several key resources for other publications related to food service, food preparation, food safety, meal planning, and more. Now let's look at the 6 columns of the Food Buying Guide. Column 1, Food as Purchased, or AP, tells you the name of the food item and the form in which it is purchased. Individual foods are arranged in alphabetical order by type of food. For instance, ham is listed under pork, mild, cured. Within each type, foods are listed according to the forms in which they appear in the market: fresh, canned, frozen, or dehydrated. Where appropriate, column 1 also includes a detailed description of the form in which items are purchased. For example, one listing for canned tuna reads, "Seafood, canned tuna chunk style, water packed. Includes USDA commodity." The listing for fresh broccoli reads, "Broccoli, fresh, untrimmed." Column 2, Purchase Unit, tells you the basic unit of purchase for the food. For most foods, the guide lists pound as the purchase unit. For some canned foods, the guide lists an institutional pack, and in many cases, a smaller pack, along with the net weight of the pack's contents. For example, the listing for canned tomatoes, whole or stewed, includes information on various can sizes and by the pound, which are ways it might come from a food vendor. Column 3, Servings per Purchase Unit, Edible Portion, or EP, shows the number of servings of a given size, which is found in column 4, and from each purchase unit from column 2. It is based on average yields from good quality foods prepared in ways that result in a minimum of waste. Column 4, Serving Size per Meal Contribution, describes a serving by weight, measure, or number of pieces or slices. Sometimes both measure and weight are given, or the measure and number of pieces or slices. Items such as a piece of cooked chicken are given an approximate serving size in measure with weight in parentheses. For example, for 3.7-ounce raw chicken drumsticks, column 4 reads, 1 drumstick, about 1.8 ounces cooked chicken with skin. Use the information in this column to determine how the foods will fit into a menu while meeting the meal pattern requirements. For many fruits and vegetables, information about 1/4 cup servings are included, and this information can be adjusted proportionately for other serving sizes. Column 5, Purchase Units for 100 servings, shows the number of purchase units you need for 100 servings. This number was calculated using the purchase unit listed in column 2 and the serving size by weight listed in column 4. Numbers in column 5 have been rounded up to help ensure enough food is available for 100 servings. Column 6, Additional Information, provides other information to help you calculate the amount of food you need to purchase and/or prepare. Column 6 also contains valuable information about yield factors for raw to cooked products, as shown by our previous chicken drumstick example. The 3.7-ounce raw drumstick provided only 1.8 ounces of cooked chicken for a yield factor of 49%. Often you will need many more servings than the standard 100 serving quantities featured in the food buying guide. So let's look at canned pineapple tidbits. Here you would look at column 5, Purchase Units, for 100 servings. In this case, it's 2 number 10 cans for 100 1/4 cup portions. Now look at column 4 and you will see that this amount is for 1/4 cup servings. So if you need to have 500 1/2 cup servings, you follow this procedure. Multiply 2 times 1/2 divided by 1/4 times 500 servings divided by 100 servings equals 20 number 10 cans. If the answer happens not to be a whole number, you should always round up to be sure you have enough. You can use the food buying guide to do the same type procedure for fruits, vegetables, and grains or breads. But remember, meat or meat alternates are listed in ounce equivalents. Fruits and vegetables are usually in 1/4 cup servings, and grains or breads are in ounce equivalents. Now let's talk about using the food buying guide to credit grains. Foods that qualify as whole grain rich for the school meal programs are foods that contain 100% whole grain or contain a blend of whole grain meal and/or flour and enriched meal and/or flour of which at least 50% is whole grain. Whole grain rich products must contain at least 50% whole grains, and the remaining grain, if any, must be enriched. Bran and germ are not creditable in the school meals program. Non-creditable ingredients in products at very low levels used as processing aids are allowable at levels less than 2%. 1/4 of an ounce equivalent is the smallest amount allowable to be credited toward the minimum quantities of grains specified in program regulations. The contribution of grains in a recipe or product formulation may be calculated to determine the number of ounce equivalent grains the recipe provides, based on 16 grams of creditable grain ingredients per ounce equivalent. Determination of crediting can come in several ways. You can compare the product weight to the updated Exhibit A attached to USDA Memorandum SP 30-2012, or refer to the child nutrition label if available. You may also use the manufacturer's product formulation sheet or your recipe to calculate the weight of creditable grains according to the instructions we will now discuss. The grams of whole grain plus enriched flour will give you the total grams of grain used. This sum is then to be divided by the number of servings your recipe yields. This number should then be divided by 16 grams, since that is the amount of grain that must be in each ounce equivalent for the grain component. Let's look at an example. You are developing a recipe for oatmeal muffin squares, and the recipe calls for 2 pounds 12 ounces of rolled oats and 5 pounds of enriched flour, and will make 96 squares. You need to know how to credit the grains in the recipe. 1 pound converts to 453.6 grams. Therefore, the recipe contains 1,247.4 grams of oats and 2,268 grams of flour. The total grain content is 3,515.4 grams, so you will perform the math as previously described. 1,247.4 grams of whole grain plus 2,268 grams of flour divided by 96 servings divided by 16 grams equals 2.2 ounce equivalent. You always round down to the nearest 1/4 ounce equivalent, so each portion provides 2.25 ounce equivalent of grains. However, the oatmeal muffin square does not count as a whole grain-rich item since the weight of the whole rolled oats is not at least half of the total weight of the grain content. Now let's look at how the food buying guide can help you develop your recipes and plan the amounts of foods to order. Say you need to cook some ground beef for a taco recipe. You'll see that 80/20 ground beef is included under the listing for ground beef not more than 20% fat, crediting for each portion of cooked ground beef. So how many servings of frozen 80/20 ground beef will we be able to get from a recipe that uses 10 pounds of ground beef? First, you locate the food that matches the product you're using in the recipe in column 1, and then the form of food you intend to serve in column 4. This is cooked lean meat. Then we'll refer to column 5 to find the amount needed to serve 100 portions of 1½ ounces. Since the ground beef comes in 10-pound rolls, it makes sense to write the recipe in 10 pounds or a multiple of 10 pounds. So 10 divided by 12.7, which is the amount per 100 portions times 100, equals 78.74 portions. But in order to make sure that you have sufficient crediting, you should always round down the number of portions, which would be 78 for this recipe. Let's work through a few more examples for a variety of foods so that you can see that this procedure will work for all items in the food buying guide as long as you insert the correct numbers. Now let's look at how many half-cup servings of frozen carrots you will get from a recipe for 5 pounds, which is about the amount that will fit in a full-size 2-inch deep steam table pan. You can see in column 4 that the serving size per meal contribution is 1/4 cup. So refer to column 2 to find the purchase unit, which is pound, and to column 5 for the purchase units for 100 servings, which is 10.2 pounds. Since the 10.2 pounds is for 1/4 cup portions, you will double the amount needed for half-cup portions to 20.4 pounds. Fill in the blanks and perform the calculations like this. 5 pounds divided by 20.4 pounds times 100 equals 24.5 1/2 cup portions of red-orange vegetable component. Remember, you always round down on the number of portions in a recipe so that the meal components are fully met. So this recipe for 5 pounds of glazed carrots would serve 24 students 1/2 cup of red-orange vegetable credit. Next, let's work with a canned product such as vegetarian beans, which you might use for a baked bean recipe. You plan to get half-cup component crediting for the beans. You use USDA baked beans in sauce, vegetarian, in number 10 cans, which contain 108 ounces. Since you will be batch cooking the beans as needed throughout the meal period, it is reasonable to write a recipe for the amount of beans that will fit in a steam table pan. So how many servings will you get from 2 number 10 cans in each pan? You can see in column 4 that the serving size per meal contribution is 1/4 cup. So refer to column 2 to find the purchase unit, which is number 10 cans, and to column 5 for the purchase units for 100 servings, which is 2.2 number 10 cans. Since the 2.2 cans is for 1/4 cup portions, you will double the amount needed for the intended half-cup portions to 4.4 cans. Fill in the blanks and perform the calculations like this. 2 cans divided by 4.4 cans times 100 equals 45.45 1/2 cup portions of legume vegetable component. Remember, you always round down on the number of portions in a recipe so that the meal components are fully met. So this recipe for 2 cans of beans would serve 45 students 1/2 cup of legume vegetable credit. Since baked beans may have other non-creditable ingredients such as water, ketchup, brown sugar, or molasses, you will need to yield test to determine the scoop or spoodle size to use to obtain no more than 45 servings from the 2 cans. Now we will try a fresh vegetable. You want to cook 6 pounds of cabbage wedges, batch cooked, in each steam table pan. You need to know if this much whole, untrimmed, or as-purchased cabbage is sufficient to yield at least 25 half-cup servings of edible portion cabbage after it is cleaned and cooked. You can see in column 4 that the serving size per meal contribution is 1/4 cup. So refer to column 2 to find the purchase unit, which is pound, and to column 5 for the purchase units for 100 servings, which is 10.2 pounds. Since the 10.2 pounds AP is for 1/4 cup portions, you will double the amount needed for half-cup portions to 20.4 pounds. Fill in the blanks and perform the calculations like this. 6 pounds divided by 20.4 pounds times 100 equals 29.4 1/2 cup portions of other vegetable component. Remember, you always round down on the number of portions in a recipe so that the meal components are fully met. So once you scoop and yield test the recipe, you determine that you actually get 25 servings. This procedure will work for any recipe, so just fill in the blanks and perform the math. Next, let's look at the AP amount of cabbage actually needed for 100 portions of cooked cabbage wedges, so that this can be accurately indicated on the daily production record for the manager's reference when ordering. You have determined that the 6 pounds actually gives 25 servings, so you take 6 pounds divided by 25 servings, multiplied by 100 to get 24 pounds per 100 servings. To make sure that the manager orders enough cabbage, the daily production record should indicate 24 pounds of whole untrimmed cabbage is needed for 100 servings of this recipe for steamed cabbage wedges. Now let's look at pre-cooked deli turkey ham to determine the amount needed for a sub-sandwich that provides 2-ounce equivalents of meats or meat alternates. Using the turkey ham, fully cooked with 15% added ingredients, will require more meat than 2 ounces of product to provide 2-ounce equivalents of meats or meat alternates. Look at column 4, serving size per meal contribution, and you will see that it takes 1.7 ounces of turkey ham to credit for 1 ounce equivalent. Therefore, for 2-ounce equivalents, you must use twice this amount, which is 3.4 ounces. For ease and accuracy in weighing, you should consider rounding up to 3.5 ounces per sandwich. When rounding up, you would record 21.9 pounds in the units for 100 column in the daily production record. This is calculated by 3.5 ounces times 100 servings divided by 16 ounces per pound equals 21.875 pounds. It is okay to round up to 21.9 pounds so that the manager will order adequate amounts for the menu. In addition to using the examples shown in this module, there is also a handy food buying guide calculator on the National Food Service Management website. You may find that it is very easy to use for some calculations. Remember that using the food buying guide as an accurate reference will help you make sure that recipes provide the correct component crediting you need for the meal pattern. And we have another lesson with more information about developing standardized recipes, so you will need to refer to the food buying guide for that process. And now let's review what you've learned.